Hello, everyone. This is Dalia, and
I'm Dina.
we are here with episode 4 of Choose Love Anyway. We're so excited. We are thinking about what the topic would be this week, and I've been wanting to interview Dina on the topic of curiosity, and then we've been talking about embracing the unknown lately, and that has felt like the topic for us this last week. And then there's a podcast that we listened to this weekend that we'll mention a bit from some of the truths or things that have been just twirling around in our mind from the episode that have felt so resonant with what we've been experiencing too. And some personal experiences, but also just lifelong experiences. And so before I start kind of interviewing Dina a little bit and then maybe interviewing each other a little bit, I'm just going to read a couple things so then you understand maybe where we are at. And then we'll kind of slowly move into the antidote to the rest of this. So the core thread of this is, what if the unknown isn't something to solve, but something to experience? So like real true presence, which we've been also talking about in the past few episodes too, in some way. And so this just feels like a really natural progression for us. Some research here is our anxiety usually picks up when we have some intolerance of uncertainty. And it looks like trying to predict the outcome, over plan to avoid discomfort, seek certainty at safety. And maybe these are not inherently negative traits, and they might have actually worked. And they were kind of the way that I heard someone just recently talk about it is they were like your best self-care tools. And now maybe that's not what you need, but your nervous system still interprets uncertainty as a threat. So then that's why your anxiety picks up, and that's why you feel like you need control. And for Dina and I, we've been talking about how predictability is that kind of feeling of wanting to be able to predict the future. But when you reframe uncertainty as possibility, the brain shifts from fear circuits to exploratory circuits, which then enters in curiosity. Our brains are wired to want certainty, but growth lives in uncertainty. And so the illusion of control is often a trauma response, a protection strategy, or an attempt to regulate fear. And, I often say your fight or flight will turn on no matter what, because that is like a natural survival strategy. But as we've talked about in previous episodes, we live in a time where fight or flight doesn't actually really need to come in. But as humans who are evolving, we still kind of feel like we need a threat. And for our time and in our situations, a threat now doesn't look like us being chased by a bear, but feeling like someone might reject us, or worrying about losing a job, or not being good enough or pretty enough, or feeling threatened by another person and that they might be better than us if we're insecure. So all of those things can kind of activate that. It's just kind of interesting to be in that place and realizing, oh, wow, I'm trying to protect myself because my nervous system genuinely feels threatened to the degree that I feel like I'm fighting off a bear. When you put it in those terms, that's kind of the same anxiety that's showing up when your nervous system feels fear and like you're not safe, which offers a lot of grace, which we're always trying to, bring to the surface. But so, Dina, did you have anything you wanted to say there?
Well, it's kind of like what he said in that podcast, which
Mm-hmm.
we're going to share the link in this episode. He pretty much compared this sense of unpredictability, the unknown, to feeling like you're going to die, right? And I feel like the conversations Dalia and I have, and something we'll discuss today, and for all of my single ladies out there or those dating, I feel that is a very big one. We desire this great love. We desire these beautiful butterflies, that feeling of really like this fairy tale love is what I call it. But that takes so much unpredictability and so much unknown and so much risk that I have even learned over the last few months where my body literally feels like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. If I care or I actually love them the way I desire to love somebody,
Mm-hmm.
then the heartbreak of that is going to feel like death. It's this really crazy nuance. I also totally believe that our reality is a reflection of our subconscious, not our conscious mind. So when you talk about like your childhood or past traumas, I have really leaned into this idea that like my love life in general and my relationship to men in the back of my mind is actually like, I guess I greatly desire this great love. A part of me, I think, even more so wants safety, and it wants to like save me
Mhm.
from this death. And so like the same thing that I desire also, without even knowing it really, unless I really look into it, it feels like death to have that feeling. And how crazy is that? Like that blows my mind. And so when he said that, I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And thank you for sharing that because I think that this idea that, as children, we first experience some of these moments where we need to then create this tool or this self-care is what in this podcast from Faith Matters. It's a book, it's an author who wrote the book. Um already free, and we'll share that in the like episode notes on Substack and on YouTube if you want to go and check it out. But he talks about how when you're a child, you pick up some of these coping mechanisms and he calls them kind of like projects. So you find things to do to avoid um, or to kind of like help you not feel the other emotions. Let's say you have a parent who is tends to be volatile. Then you learn as a child that you cannot be volatile because it creates that in your parent. They're triggered by you being that way. So you learn to repress some of those things and you maybe find other coping mechanisms, right? And that looks like so many different things. Or if your mother is depressed, an example that he uses is you learn to not try to overwhelm your mother. So you try not to have too many emotions. You try to kind of be pleasing and helpful and easy. As a kid, it's like unhealthy for you to actually think that way. But when you don't feel safe to be able to just do those things, you then create some of these projects. And sometimes that can turn into so many different things. Like another example of someone on the podcast brings up is feeling like you need to keep working and making money for yourself and trying to get to this certain amount of money because it makes you maybe feel safe or secure or free. And that might have come right from feeling like if there was a stressor in your home about money, you thought this could be a solution. If I work hard, if I do all these things, then I'll never end up in this place where I feel so helpless, where, maybe money disagreements are happening in the home or whatever. And obviously, we could have a whole discussion just about that. But I find it kind of interesting in how it informs the experience of then being an adult and still using some of those same coping mechanisms. And something that he said that, of course, I've heard all of the things that he said so many times, right? We've been learning these things. But there was something about the way that he said it that shifted something inside of me and kind of helped me to believe it deeper, maybe even imagine the new neural pathway in which I can move. And I've done a lot of IFS work, inner child work. And that's essentially kind of what he's saying. But what he's also saying is, as adults, oftentimes we don't re-examine or go back, 2 decades and decide, well, can I handle more now? Can I handle unpredictability? Can I handle people being upset with me? Can I handle it now as an adult? Because you have a very different system now, right? And so he talks about this idea of right exposure therapy, kind of, is what I'm interpreting it as, which is putting yourself in situations where that comes up in you and you feel like you want to die. And for me, I'll be vulnerable in this situation and say, for me, I disappointing someone, making someone sad because of like my life choices or the way I choose to live my life or anything like that. To watch someone be disappointed in me or not be pleasing to them, sometimes I haven't done it enough times to know that it feels like dying. But even the possible moment of it just sends me into this deep spiral and a lot of anxiety for me, which does feel like dying, the closest thing to dying. And also puts me in a depressive state where I'm just like, oh man, why does this have to be so heavy? But then what I can remind myself now and what he's saying is what you can get comfortable with is knowing, like for me, it's that I will disappoint people on and off for the rest of my life. That would be like the medicine, if you will, is accepting that reality because that is actually the truth. And that is actually living in the moment. And then from there, it's not that, oh, it'll suddenly get easier to do that. But over time, it will, because once you practice something, right, it gets easier to do it. Anyway, I won't just retell the episode, but I wanted to ask if you had anything else to say on that topic. And then I was going to move on to the next part.
No, I think you said it beautifully.
Okay.
I totally agreed.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next bit, I wanted to talk about the antidote to this. So, the antidote to anxiety is curiosity. And some of the research out there shows that curiosity reduces fear response, it activates dopamine pathways, and it increases resilience. So, curiosity has the power to literally change your physiological response to the unknown. And I find that to be so powerful. Curiosity can change your physiological response to the unknown. That is so empowering to me because the other thing that he said was that what if another reality that you could accept is to just get comfortable with the unknown? That my only real responsibility is to just live in the present moment and face the best I can what's happening in the present. And obviously, we know that anxiety tries to take us into the past and the future. It's often that if when we're really in the present moment, it's very hard for anxiety to turn on, right? That's why when you're meditating, when you're getting into your body, when you're in a really joyful moment, when, right, like when you're really living, it's really hard to be anxious. But I find it interesting that the unknown could be easier and those difficult moments could be easier if you got curious. That just like makes me feel so empowered. Does it make you feel empowered?
For sure. The moment I finally realized that if you get curious about how you ended up in a situation, it is the most empowering thing. You take all of the power back. And it's not like saying, oh, I'm God now and I get to control. It's saying, I am responsible for how I feel, or maybe not even how I feel, but what I do with my feelings. And
Yeah.
I am like a magnet who gets to attract or unattract anything that I want and don't want.
Yeah, and so also just for listeners maybe that don't know, what does the unknown look like? So I think the unknown looks different for everybody, right? Some of us are comfortable with some things, right, in the unknown. So if you had to answer, what does the unknown mean to you? Or kind of the things that you can't predict, maybe.
I feel like that's exactly what the unknown is to me, is things that I cannot predict. I cannot predict the outcome of what is about to happen. I do not know what is actually going to happen.
Why do you want to predict something?
But that's a really good question. That is a really good question. Okay. I think that I have a belief that if I can predict what the future is going to be like, I can prepare better for it and I can show up better and I can almost maybe, which now as it's leaving my mouth, I'm like, oh, do I want to predict the future? Because then I can better prepare for it because I believe that I'm inadequate exactly as I am to handle whatever comes next. So why would I need to prepare for something if I'm already ready the way that I am? And I think this just like I'm having like
So
an
then,
aha moment
wait, so then that's what I was going to say is why do you want to prepare for it?
because I feel inadequate because I don't trust myself enough. And as we're like sitting here, I'm like in real time to just see like, whoa,
Just doing a
I'm
little
having such an
session.
aha. I know, guys, work with her. This is crazy. No, but that's actually so true. And I think that's exactly what he says. He says, what if you, instead of focusing so much on knowing the future, you just know that you're able to handle whatever happens, whether it's good, bad, no matter what happens, focus on knowing and nurturing the thought and belief that you know that you are able to handle it and handle
Yeah.
whatever comes next versus being able to predict the future. So, like, make it so much less about the ability to know what's going to happen next and more about the ability to know that you can handle whatever happens
Whatever
next.
happens next, which I guess for some of us would be what helps us do that, our faith, our belief that there's a divine power that is guiding us, that's all around us. But even if you don't even know that, let's say, I think it's kind of a miracle that you can just actually work with your mind because our minds are wanting to also keep us safe, right? And so it's just kind of redirecting your mind to this other idea. Because so often we want to focus on the thing that's out of our control. But to your point, and the thing that you're bringing up and reminding me of in what he said, which is that what are the things you do know? Because maybe unknown feels so big and scary to you, but there are so many things that you do know right now. Like, I do know how to have a healthy relationship with someone. I do know how to love my children. I do know how to feed myself and my family. I do know that I have a bed to sleep in tonight. I do know that I'm loved, I'm cared for, and I know how to take care of myself. which oftentimes when we're learning about these stories or when we use these same stories that we used as children, a lot of these things weren't true for us. We couldn't actually say some of those things. We relied on someone to offer us a lot of that. And so I think reminding of yourself of what you do know, I think just empowers you in a way that then it's harder to actually be worried because your initial needs are right there. Like it kind of reminds me of five touch points. I can't
Like
remember,
something, yeah, something that like
like you
something you
can
see, smell,
accessing your five
touch.
senses.
Right.
Yes, in the moment. I feel like it's almost that, but speaks to me even more. So I wanted to ask you again, and I guess a follow-up question. Is the unknown scary, exciting, or both for you? And where are you currently at?
Oh, this is so applicable to my life right now.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's both. And I obviously have talked to you about the situation, but I definitely think it's both. And actually, as you were saying, what do I know? I think it's also, I know that I am resilient. I know that I have survived every single thing I thought I couldn't. I know that the times I thought the heartache was never going to go away, it does. The time I thought I was going to never stop thinking about a person every single day, or all day, every day has stopped. And there have been months where I don't think about this person anymore. I know that everything that I ever felt was me dying actually just killed off a part of me that was no longer, like you said, it's that project that I actually
Yeah.
don't need to keep working on anymore. And
Mm.
sometimes I think when talking about curiosity, I think I realized that with curiosity, you can sort of discover these projects that no longer serve you in a much more
Yeah.
gentle, softer way that involves a lot less pain. And I think whatever you believe in, whether it's your higher self, God, the universe, a divine power, or just nothing at all. It's just life teaching you. Like, I believe in a higher power. I think higher power wants me to grow and wants me to evolve, to expand, to be the, like, not even the happiest version of myself, but the most fulfilled version of myself, the most present version of myself. And I think it requires us to let go of these projects that we were taught to work on as children, like that performing or looking a certain way or achieving enough things or earning enough money or having enough friends, being connected enough to people is somehow going to earn us a spot in this safety, or
Mm.
is like, then I'm safe, when a lot of the ways we're taught to work on these projects is actually just surviving. So it's not really us, and we can't be present because we're so focused on the outcomes or becoming this thing, achieving this thing. And I've always thought, what do people mean? You are worthy exactly as you are. You are lovable exactly as you are. I think it's just trusting that there's nothing I can or cannot do that makes me unlovable in this moment or unworthy of everything my heart desires. And just tying it back to the curiosity, I've learned enough that life, the divine wants me to evolve so much that sometimes it does feel like literal death or like heartbreak to end these projects and to realize like they are literally no longer serving me. Like
Yeah.
the feeling of belonging when it requires me to shrink or do things I do not want to do and is draining to me is not a project I want to work on anymore. Negative things can be predictable too. Like
Yeah, that's
you
so
can
true.
predict the lack of sleep or an unhealthy relationship or whatever. Like familiarity does not equal safety by any means. So then you start to realize that these familiar projects, a lot of them don't serve me anymore. So I guess back to curiosity, it's like the
Yeah.
more curious I get, the more I can discover these projects that no longer serve me in a much softer, gentler way that doesn't actually involve me feeling like I'm dying or involve me hurting another person. It's a much more controlled environment almost of like letting go of these projects.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
that
so
was like a long answer, but
no, 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 but I no, but I appreciate what you're saying, and it's kind of bringing us into my next question, which is, have you always been curious, or has that been more of, a recent thing? Because I think oftentimes with curiosity, we can either be people who, when something feels uncertain, the first instinct sometimes is to be afraid of it and to maybe try to resist it and kind of see if there's a way out of the uncertainty. And I think at one point we were both kind of that way. And I think that I would say in probably the last 6 months to a year, you have stepped into more, I'm like answering your question for you. I'm just sharing my perspective. I feel like you now, maybe you get a little afraid at first, but then I think you kind of also get curious about your fear. And so rather than letting the fear drive the car, you kind of look at the fear and you're like, why do you want to drive this car? What's going on? You know? And I know the car thing, I always use that analogy because it just really resonated for me. But go ahead and answer that question. When did you feel like you became more curious and what maybe sparked that in you?
So I don't think I realized how curious I was or what a gift it is until the last 6 months. But my ex sister-in-law used to always call me a sponge. And she's like, "You're my little sponge. You're my little sponge." And I think it's because she was someone I looked up to so much. I wanted to learn everything about how she lived her life, what she did, how she
Yeah.
made decisions, all of this stuff.
Hmm.
And then obviously I was married, and the way I got my divorce or the way I realized I had been living for someone other than myself is I had everything I was ever taught. I did all of these little projects, you could say.
Yeah.
I had built a home. I had no debt. I'm not sharing this in a boastful way at all. I'm just sharing this like at
Totally.
the age of 25 to have built a house in downtown Tampa, to have had our cars paid off, no student debt, like all of these things, be married to a great person too, like have a friend group, have a job, have a degree. On paper, you would say I had everything. I had it all. And for some reason, when people would ask me my advice, I felt so inadequate. I felt like such a fraud sharing it. And maybe you could say there's traumas of like, I just didn't feel good enough no matter what for it. But
Yeah.
I think two truths can exist at the same time, whether it was that or the fact that the foundation was that I was just trying to earn worth and love from my parents, essentially, I guess, and from those around me, from like something outside of myself. I
Yeah.
think the feeling of misery and deep emptiness I felt having everything that I was ever taught was going to bring me this joy and fulfillment made me feel like either one, I was psychotic and I didn't want to exist in this world anymore because I just felt like this is crazy. Like, how can this be happening? This makes
Yeah.
absolutely no sense. And then I also felt this deep feeling of like, there is a pool for my soul that I cannot explain, that makes zero logical sense, and I have to follow it through, or else the only other option is I don't belong on this earth anymore physically. And like, it sounds really sad and it sounds really deep. And I remember, I mean, this is just like a little vulnerable, and I'm not trying to trigger anybody by any means. I'm just trying to really be transparent here. I would pray that like I would get hit by a truck so I wouldn't have to go through with the divorce, or like admit that I
Yeah.
had to undo everything I had, like I had to undo everything that I had worked the 25 years of my life to build, and I finally had it. Like there is a real it's gonna make me emotional. It is like a real come to moment where you realize like either I'm a freak and I don't belong on this earth, or I have something that trained me to put my value into this thing when actually there's something so much deeper, and I just am so removed from myself. And so that's when I dove into like the spiritual stuff. That's when I dove into therapy. That's when I think I finally was able to like accept all these tools that you had been trying to get me to have for so many years, that I was just like, absolutely not. Because again, our mom did our best, but we weren't raised that way. We weren't raised to believe in that. We were very fear based driven. We were very driven by this performance, this achievement, survival. And so I survived and I avoided this feeling of, I guess, death. And it brought me to the very feeling that I was trying to avoid. And then I felt literally
Mm.
like death. I felt dead inside, actually. Like I was trying so hard to prevent this feeling that
Yeah.
that's the very thing I attracted. And so I am so grateful for the people in my life and the tools that I do have. And I think that's why also we're sitting here recording this podcast, because life is hard and it's so easy to feel like you're crazy and you're alone in this. And some of my closest friends now have found me through my social media and through me sharing my story. And they have left their lives behind that also made them feel that way. And I've had people message me and they're on the other side of this because I shared my story. And again, I just realized like I can't be the only one that feels this way. And how did this happen?
that would be a curious question where you're like, "Why did this happen?" When you started to ask why versus what's wrong with me, or it's
For
when it
sure.
shifted from more of like you being bad or, the different things that you might have started to think to like, well, then what is the purpose of my life? If this is what I'm supposed to do, why am I doing it? Is that kind of, would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, no, thank you for clearing that up. Yeah, because I really don't know how to explain that, but as you said it, it makes a lot more sense to me. I think that I maybe physically couldn't handle and bear the thought that something must be inherently wrong with me and that I'm like defective, because
Mm,
then that would lead me to wanting to end my life. Like, then that would be the thought that I would have, that I would just beg
yeah.
God to like take me away.
Yeah.
And so because that was so unbearable to live with, I had to change my mind to this can't be. And it wasn't avoiding accountability. It was just there's probably something here that was outside of my control. I was the dependent variable. Again, going back to what I said in the first couple of episodes, I realized that it wasn't so much of me being defective. It wasn't so much about nature. It was about nurture and how I was nurtured that got me here. Which means if it's something that was nurtured in me, it's something I can change. Because
Yeah.
so then I had to get curious about what are the things that got me here? What are the beliefs? What are the projects that I had worked on that are no longer serving me? And I had to get so curious and use every tool possible. I had to really get to the root and realize that life wasn't so much about becoming someone or something, but unbecoming every single thing that we're not. And I think that kind of goes back to what he's saying. It's like learning and unlearning the projects and releasing the projects that no longer serve you. And so when I started doing that, it had so much more empowerment. It was like a will to live, to get up the next morning, and it pushed me through and to find purpose in my pain and to realize that I literally broke down and broke open. And I think what a lot of people don't do enough, I think the curiosity is what allowed me to break open. Whereas I think before, and a lot of times, the breakdown can cause people to harden and close off their hearts and sort of believe that they are defective, but not in a way that like they want to take their life, but that they are just closed off to
Mhm.
connection, to experiences, to living.
Yeah, yeah, that's really well said. Going off that thought and relationships and connection, how do you stay open when you don't know where something is going? Using curiosity as the tool.
You help me. You help me so much. I actually, this is a little funny story, but when I was in Asheville, there was like one straight attractive guy that I met, and my close friends know the story. But long story short, he basically ended up being somebody that was in this long term relationship, but had told me he was just talking to somebody, and we had met literally one night. It was not a big deal, but the way he was texting me was very much like, oh, I want to see you, whatever else. So then I somehow there was connections, discovered he was in such a long relationship. And I'm saying this that I could have sat there and blamed him and been like, wow, all men suck. They are unfaithful, whatever. And you know what I did? I was just like, how did I end up here? How did I attract this situation? And it's not like this is, if you know me, you know this isn't kind of new, like attracting unavailable men. I'm going to expose myself here. But I started doing a lot of work on like, why am I attracting these men, whether they're in another relationship or they're just emotionally unavailable, whatever it is, why do I do that? And discovered that it was just the predictability that it's not going to work out with them anyway. It's that knowing that, again, predictability can be negative. It's like being able to predict that it's not going to go anywhere. So it automatically feels safe because I already know what the end is and that it's not going to work versus the risk of the unknown. And as I'm sitting here now, I totally am so fascinated by the unknown. I think, again, curiosity, I have learned in the last few months, and again, with your help and you helping me feel safe and reminding me that I'm safe. And now I ask my friends to tell me that I'm safe. especially with the boys. I'm like totally leaning into the unknown and just being like, okay, you know what? The unknown is where the magic happens, because magic is something you can't see. It's something that happens in the present moment. It's something that surprises you. And in California, you taught me that thrillers are not always horror movies, but all horror movies are thrillers, and that thrillers are something that just like excite you or like make your heart rate go up because like you're at the edge of your seat and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And I never, going back to exposure therapy, that is how love feels to me. That is how like I think in every other aspect of my life, I actually feel pretty secure and good.
Yeah.
Like I'm very comfortable with the unknown of most
Yeah.
things. But for me, it's the love. And with men, that feels like a thriller. And I actually remember in California, I was like, Dalia, I have to watch thrillers so that I can expose my body to this sensation, because this is exactly what it feels like to me. It literally feels like death. And I remember it like gripped my heart. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
don't
like
go
you're
in
gonna
that room. Like,
or
don't.
something, you're gonna have a panic attack. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. That's so interesting. And I mean, I feel like we could even unpack that so much deeper. Like we could even go into layers of that, but I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that and giving real life examples. And I feel like you're so good at that, at being so vulnerable. And so I'm hearing as we're talking, I'm thinking that maybe there's this theme of living in the unknown isn't about not being scared or not feeling safe, but it's being curious enough to stay there and experience it and to be curious about the experience of feeling those things. So as you're feeling nervous or you're feeling scared, it's being like, okay, what about this is scaring you? And then reminding yourself, here are the reasons why I am safe. I am safe because I have food to eat. I'm not in danger. There's no physical danger around me right now. I have clothes on my back.
You'll survive. Yeah.
Yet, this moment. So reminding yourself that. And so then if those things are okay, if I'm okay in that front, right? Telling your now brain, right? So now can I get curious about this? So how do I stay through this scary kind of experience of not knowing what's going to happen next in this relationship, or not knowing that this person is still going to be here in a year from now, because all I really need to know is what's happening right now. I think sometimes it's just giving like our brain a job to do, but it's not even actually doing anything. It's busy work essentially that you're giving your brain because you can't actually predict the future.
No, you get stuck in these loops. That's
Yeah.
why I said, oh my gosh, I was stuck in a loop of just thinking about the same scenario over and over again. Like, if I go down this pathway or this pathway,
Yeah.
it's like, what if I just accept that life goes on? And I think that's what I've really done the last few months is, something wasn't working out the way I wanted. And I just was like, but I get to live my life anyway. And I'm going to do whatever I can to still live the most fulfilling life, even
Yeah.
if I don't have this situation figured out.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I really appreciate that. Yeah, that's really powerful. And I guess maybe maturing and growing up is learning to regulate an uncertainty instead of trying to eliminate it, the thing that we can't control, which it can be hard, but I think I'm in a point in my life right now where that doesn't scare me so much. If anything, I feel so liberated by the thought of not trying to control anything. And that I can just trust that whatever comes next, I can face it. And again, we have so many other tools. If you believe that, God is there, you can use that as a tool, right? I will be able to face it. But I think that's what actual real faith is. And I think I'm just starting to begin to really go a layer deeper, right? Which is that is actual faith, is to believe that you can make it through these moments. And I thought maybe that I would accumulate enough tools. And I don't think those tools are bad. I think that they're great still. I don't think they no longer serve a purpose, but I think it was all about me being able to do more to earn safety. And like you said at the beginning, actually, there's no earning it. It's just trusting that you already have it and that you are going to be okay.
Yeah. And you know what? My favorite tool for
Uh-huh.
facing the unknown lately has been stating my feelings and sharing them and knowing
Mm,
that the safest, the safest thing that we can be is our most authentic selves. And I
mm,
think we think that the opposite is true, but I promise I have tested this so many times, even coming back here to Tampa with these people that I honestly like. A lot of them don't make me feel safe. Not my close circle, but like my B and C circles. Even this past weekend, and I'm not gonna lie, I think sometimes when you drink a little alcohol, you feel a little more unhinged. But I will say, even when I'm sober, this is a practice that I have implemented for unpredictability or the unknown, is just stating exactly how I feel. If I am scared about something, if I'm nervous about something, if the feeling that comes to mind is I'm terrified or I'm embarrassed to admit this, I will state them and I will tell the person. So let's say I went on a date. I know also with the right people, or if I am meant to be in a certain situation, I will be able to express how I feel. And if I do not feel that I can express myself authentically, then I will not put myself in that situation again because it's too draining and it costs too much of my energy to mold
Yeah.
or shrink or avoid just admitting how I feel. So with this person, I I'm able to say I am terrified and I want you to know that I am scared, but I really want to not be scared because I actually want to get to know you. And so
Yeah.
I think the right people also take your hand and they help you feel safe, even if you feel scared at first. And I think that's also the part of that unknown. It's like, I am telling you how I feel, and I don't know what your response is going to be, but can I trust that if the best thing
Yeah.
and the safest thing that I can be is my authentic self, then I know it's like, again, you have a higher power, whatever you believe in. But I think the only way that I can guarantee that the highest power is going to help me achieve what I desire is if I am completely my most honest, authentic self, which is just saying, like, I'm scared and trusting that the universe or God is going to just take care of the rest. And that has been so tried and true for me in the last 2 months, just saying how it is. And then people are meeting me where I'm at. And it is so liberating. It's almost something like, I think me saying I'm embarrassed gives them permission to also admit the things they're embarrassed about and that they wouldn't have said.
Of course. I think you offer that so often. You being curious with yourself also gives permission for other people to be curious about themselves. And you acknowledge, oh, this is what I feel embarrassed about. Someone else is then like, oh, am I also embarrassed about that? Or what am I embarrassed about? I think the curiosity kind of spreads. And so I guess we wanted to maybe end this episode with just encouraging you to like maybe look at something that you have been maybe scared to look at, or that uncertainty in your life that maybe is giving you some anxiety, maybe just start gently and with love by just asking one question about it, trying to get curious with that fear and know that it's probably trying to protect you and that you will get through this. Somehow you will make it through it, or look for evidence in your life of you getting through things that were hard. I'm so thankful for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being here with us and tuning in again. And we're so excited to see you next week. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Bye.